This right behind me is the golden city of Rajasthan. It is located in one of the farthest points away in the western part of India, in the deserts where no one could ever survive here. But it is nonetheless one of the most beautiful places in India, and in my opinion, it might be one of the most worth visiting places just because of the history, the forts, the palaces, and the temples that you can find here. It's been influenced by cultures all around the world, from the Silk Road, from all different civilizations, and the result is this beautiful and magnificent city right behind me. Welcome to the city of Jaisalmer. Good morning and welcome to another day here in one of the most beautiful cities in all of India. This is the city of Jaisalmer, located in the far western corner of the country and the state of Rajasthan. It is India's great desert city and it is beautiful. I think if you've seen the previous video here from Jaisalmer, you'll know that I've fallen in love with the place. I love the color of the buildings, I love the vibe of the city. It is such an incredible place. But today, I'm going to give you the full guide of what you need to know in order to visit Jaisalmer. We're going to visit the main fort. We're going to visit some things around the city. It's going to be a really complete guide to this city, and it's going to be a great day because the weather is amazing. The sun has finally come out. And I have to say, even earlier this morning, that was not the case. Even earlier this morning, the clouds were completely covering Jaisalmer, and even over there, you can still see there are a few dark clouds over there. So temporarily, we have some sun, we have a bit of a blue sky just right over there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of it, and we're going to begin our adventures here in Jaisalmer. It feels so nice to actually feel like a desert in the desert city. For once, the sun has finally come out. I know that for the most part, about 364 days of the year, this city is one of the driest cities in all of India. But yesterday, it was raining a lot. So I am appreciating the sun, I am appreciating the dry weather, and I'm actually really excited to get a desert feel for the desert city of India. Welcome to the official entrance into the fort of Jaisalmer. This is one of the few gates that you can use to enter the actual fort, and its name is the Akai Pole. Pole in here means gate, so whenever you see the pole, that's usually a sign that this is a place where you can enter the fort from. As you can see, it is not the largest entrance, especially compared to the entrances, for example, at Mehrangarh Fort when we were in Jodhpur. This is tiny compared to that, and that's because they didn't really need that much space. You know, the Mehrangarh Fort was for elephants and massive beasts to go through, but here in a desert city, the animals we're talking about are more about camels and cows that need to pass through. The cultural differences here make you realize that Rajasthan is not just one state, but actually a state of many different kingdoms. And Jodhpur was one kingdom that ruled over an entire area, and this was another kingdom here in the Rajasthani desert. So there's so much going on here in this incredible city, and we're about to enter it for the first time. I'm excited, but at the same time, I also know that this fort is nowhere near as big and as massive as the other forts we've seen here in India. So with that, let's go ahead and let's finally walk through this incredible gate right here. Coming through that gate, we have finally made it to the next sort of set of gates here to the fort, and this is Suraj Pole. Again, Pole meaning gate is the fort, and Suraj actually meaning the sun gate. So this right here is the sun gate. It is bigger and grander than the other entry gate that we just went in from, because this was built much earlier than the previous one. However, it is still no comparison to the massive gates of Mehrangarh and Jodhpur, but still a really impressive gate. I'm telling you this right here, this is metal right here. It's not wood, it's not any other material, and it is easily one of the strongest materials you can use to build a protective door for your fort. you might have noticed is that through this fort, through this gate, you'll see a lot of rickshaws, motorcycles, even cars running through this entire fort. Like, for example, right now you can see all those motorcycles right behind me going through the fort. That was not the case at Mehrangarh, and it wasn't even the case at Amir Fort either. However, Jaisalmer is different because Jaisalmer is a living fort. Living in the sense that people are still living inside. People still use it for their daily needs, are still housed in there. They still live there as if it was hundreds of years ago. So therefore, the people still use it as an actual city. The whole city might be a beautiful sort of heritage site, but it's not just a living open-air museum, it's actually the houses of people who live inside this fort. That's what makes it a living fort, that's what makes it special, and it's also why the people are coming in and out all the time with their motorcycles. It also means that you can actually stay inside the fort overnight. There are hostels and hotels within the fort that you can stay at. We haven't chosen to do that, but it is definitely a possibility here in Jaisalmer. Now, ever since we've come into the actual fort itself, we've sort of been rushing to one main site here inside the fort, and that is this incredible structure right behind me, because it closes at 1:12 in the afternoon. It actually closes pretty early during the day. This right here is the main Jain temple here in Jaisalmer, and it's been around for hundreds of years, since 1509. Now, I'm gonna go check it out first. We're gonna go see what's inside. Apparently there are 6 different sections to it, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about this temple itself. Welcome to the Jain temple here in Jaisalmer, one of the most incredible sites to visit here in the old city. Now, the Jain temple was built over 500 years ago, which is why you can tell these intricate carvings have lasted and been tested by time. The temple was originally built because a lot of Jains were coming through here, because there was a lot of the routes that went through Jaisalmer. Trading routes a lot went through here, especially when Jains were going to Pakistan. And if you don't already know, Jainism is a little different from the other religions here in India. They cannot eat root vegetables. There are certain restrictions that apply to them but don't apply to other restrictions. So they needed their own place of worship, their own temple here in Jaisalmer, because it was such a hub for Jains who were going through the city. Hence, this entire temple was built. Now, the temple complex itself consists of 6 different complexes, and let me just say they are pretty incredible. Each one has its own different charm and uniqueness to it, and to be honest, I spent so much time in the first one I didn't realize there were 5 other ones worth visiting. So don't make that mistake. When you come here, allocate enough time for each temple, or else you're going to find yourself templed out by the last one. But this is, I think, the 5th one of the entire temple complex. As you can see, it is stunning, it is beautiful. The carvings have continued to blow me away, and I think that's something that's really unique here in Jaisalmer. And on top of that, the stone that is used here is that same unique golden sandstone that defines Jaisalmer generally. It's beautiful, it's incredible, and just look where I am. These columns, these pillars, these carvings, that's what makes the Jain temple one of the must-sees here in Jaisalmer. That one of the reasons the Jain temple was even built here in Jaisalmer is that as the trade routes developed and they needed sort of new temples for the Jains, they ended up building this temple here in Jaisalmer. Remember, Jaisalmer was a big part of the Silk Road. A lot of the trade from China all the way to Europe and then through Pakistan would pass through here. It also means that there's a lot of influences here in the temple, which means, for example, if you look at this one right behind me, this is a dragon. The dragon is not Rajasthani, it is not traditionally Rajasthani, it's not even traditionally Indian. This is an example of Chinese influence actually here in the temple, because of the way the Silk Road functioned, and that it would carry the influences over. Very interesting, did not expect to find a Chinese dragon here at a Jain temple. That has to be one of the most beautiful places you can see here in Jaisalmer. You could easily spend hours just spending time in all the 6 different temples of the Jain temple, and we're actually leaving just as they're about to close. Incredible place, a really quiet spot, and just the heritage is awesome. Now, welcome to the city palace of Jaisalmer. Jaisalmer was a fort that was built by the king of his clan when he was trying to find a new place right over this triangular shaped hill, and this would have been the palace that the royal family would have stayed in. It's a beautiful place, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start climbing and learning about this incredible palace situated right inside the old fort of Jaisalmer. So the entire fort of Jaisalmer was constructed in the 1100s. That's right, 1100s, almost 1,000 years ago, by the Maharaja, who was looking for a new place for his people. They found this place, they decided to build a fort on it, but the fort wasn't actually completed in the very beginning. It took time and time, many years, for different parts of the fort to eventually develop to what it is today. But one thing I've noticed about this entire fort, and this palace in particular, is that it's very adapted to the local place and the local environment. So for example, if you look at this gun right behind me, this might look like any ordinary gun, but in actuality, what they did is that they adapted this gun to the use of camels. So they used the natural animals that were already in the environment and then used them to their advantage, which is why this gun is adapted for use for warfare with camels. In the same way, this entire palace is for water drainage as well. So they were trying to collect as much water as they could because they're literally in the middle of the desert. That's also been a curse for this palace because it hasn't been able to withstand much of the water, and that's been the big problem with crumbling the palace. So a lot of the conservation efforts within this palace have been focused on filtering out the water and making sure that the palace itself doesn't crumble because of water erosion. But it's very interesting how they've adapted the city to the environment instead of changing the environment to the city as we do today in the modern day. They just didn't have the technology, but they were really focused on trying to live in the desert and make the most of life out here in, well, literally the middle of nowhere. You can see here all the different kings that used to live inside this palace. They were all the rulers that used to live in this city palace within this fort, and you can see that the founder here from 1156, that's when they were ruling this place. There's so much history here. I mean, American history just pales in comparison to the length of history of forts like these here in Jaisalmer. Welcome to the roof of the palace of Jaisalmer fort. From here, you literally can see everything, everywhere, for miles on end. You can see the windmills in the distance. You can see the city below me, that golden color, the yellow color of the sandstone. It is very beautiful, but the actual roof itself, as you can probably tell, it's a black tarp all over it. It's not as glamorous as it seems. But you can literally see how dry it is beyond there. You can literally see the windmills out there because it's nothing. It's literally the middle of nowhere. That Jaisalmer just props up in the middle of the desert. But it is really beautiful. The city just spread out below me is incredible. But like I mentioned earlier, the actual roof itself is kind of underwhelming. You can see right here a recreation of the actual triangular shape of the fort of Jaisalmer. It is actually really triangular and it's just perched on top of this hill, but from here you realize it's actually not that big, especially compared to some of the other forts we've seen here across India. And just like that, we have officially gotten out of the city palace. I have to say, the palace is slightly underwhelming. I was expecting a little more. I was expecting a little more beauty, but even compared to the Pat Valley we saw yesterday, this is kind of underwhelming, kind of disappointing compared to that. So the history of learning about the royal family and the history of Jaisalmer is incredible, and that will be a great place to learn about it. But in terms of the actual aesthetic sense, I'm not so sure about that. Well, just because you're king doesn't mean you're very good at art. About about 15 minutes outside of Jaisalmer, we've come to the incredible series of structures right behind me. This is Bada Bagh, and it's a place that is a perfect continuation of our discussion of the history of Jaisalmer and the royal family, because this is where all the royals are buried. These are their cenotaphs, and you can see them all sort of put within these beautiful, ornate structures that all dot along this hillside. There are so many of them, and you cannot count them. They're so numerous. Now, these range from hundreds and hundreds of years ago to this one right here, which was only built in 1949 when the king actually died during that year. So these are all built as time went on. Some of them are definitely older, and you can tell that by the age and the wear and tear. Some of them are newer, like the ones right behind me, which look really, really new and are still quite well preserved and well conserved. So it's a very interesting place. It's a very quiet place, actually, and you can even see the windmills in the background. We're literally in the dunes, almost in the desert, far outside of Jaisalmer, and I guess it's a pretty smart place to put all the cenotaphs of the royal family. As you can probably tell, that one right there did not withstand the test of time. Like I said, some of these are really old depending on who the cenotaphs are for, and if the cenotaph is for someone who lived 500-600 years ago, it's no surprise that the outcome of it looks a little something like that. So, I need to make a little slight correction to what I mentioned earlier. The kings of the royal family are not actually buried here. They were cremated here. Right behind me, you can actually see the cremation pits where they were cremated. However, what is here are the sort of cenotaphs that are memorial to the members of the royal family that were cremated here and whose ashes were eventually thrown back into the Ganga, as is the traditional Indian ways. Now, what's really interesting is that behind each of these domes, there might be smaller ones. So for example, let's take this one for example. There's a big dome here, and then there are two smaller domes right behind me. This is because in the royal family, when the king died, they would then have their wives buried right next to them. So the two smaller ones usually would be for the wives, and the big one would usually be for the king. It's so expansive. Total in this place there are 107 different domes that stretch back hundreds of years, I think back to the 1300s, 1400s, and it is a massive complex with all these different domes dating back literally hundreds of years. Unfortunately, as you can tell, some of them haven't made it, and actually, funnily enough, the stones that you can probably see right over there, these are the result of an earthquake that happened right there that caused this one to fall down in 2001. So not all of them have been preserved in the best conditions, but the ones that you can see today are a testament to how incredible the architecture was here back in Jaisalmer. I have to say, this place is a really cool place, and it's actually a really good continuation after you've seen the old fort palace, because it basically shows you all the kings and all of the what we would call the maharvals here in Jaisalmer. But it's just a really eerie place. I mean, imagine hundreds of royal family members just memorialized here for eternity. It's eerie, it's weird, it's interesting, but I would say it's definitely well worth a visit, considering it's only 15 minutes outside of Jaisalmer. But with that, it's time to head back into the city of Jaisalmer. Welcome back to the Jaisalmer fort. As you can see, the golden city is shining and the sun is slowly starting to set. But the fact is that, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, this is one of the few living forts that are accessible in India and in all over the world. People still live in here. So one of the best things to actually do here in Jaisalmer is just to stroll the streets of this old fort city and see what there is. People live here, people have houses here, and it's a very interesting vibe to walk through an actual living fort. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to explore a little bit more of the fort, and we're going to see what is on offer in this incredible little triangular shaped hill. You can see here all the rocks that are of that beautiful Jaisalmer sandstone color. Even hundreds of years later, they're still using the same types of materials, the same types of colors to keep the same consistency within the city. That's how you preserve a city. That's how you preserve the cultural integrity and heritage of Jaisalmer. Crazy to imagine that this here in Jaisalmer. Honestly, if I were to own a home somewhere, this would not be a bad place to buy a house. There is the occasional threat of an earthquake from Gujarat, but that's not going to stop me from getting a house here in Jaisalmer. It is so beautiful, and with that beautiful Jaisalmer sandstone, the colors are absolutely incredible. Now, across the Jaisalmer fort, there are 99 bastions. These bastions are used to protect the actual fort, and as you can see, they're all armed with something like this, a cannon, to attack from any outsiders who come. But from the bastions, you can see an incredible view of the entire city of Jaisalmer. I would stay here and watch the sunset. Unfortunately, it is literally starting to rain. Look at that storm cloud developing out in the sand dune. It's coming towards us right now. It's literally going to start raining heavily. So we're gonna head back into the city and find some shelter. But this is the view you get when you come to Jaisalmer. There's a reason it's called the Golden City. And from up here, you can truly see how the color of the buildings look like they're golden. But like I mentioned, I can literally feel the raindrops falling on my face. So we're gonna go ahead, head back into the city, and let's see if we can find some shelter. So far today we have seen a Jain temple, but Jainism is obviously not the dominant religion here in India, not in Jaisalmer, not in Rajasthan. The dominant religion here is still Hinduism, which is why we've come to this incredible temple. This is Lakshmi Nath, one of the Hindu temples here inside Jaisalmer Fort. It is an extremely old temple, and right now we're here because in the evening time, well, not really evening, but in the late afternoon time, around when the sun sets, they have something called an arti, which is a religious sort of ceremony that they conduct every day as an offering to the gods. This is something I've seen before, but never here in Jaisalmer, and it is a very, very interesting process. It's an interesting ceremony, and it happens every day. So we're going to go ahead and be quiet. We're going to go ahead and watch the actual arti take place, and it's going to be a very, very interesting experience. Well, unfortunately, filming inside the temple was not allowed. But the arti is a very interesting sort of ceremony. Everybody around here, once they hear the drum sort of beating, they'll rush into the temple and they'll join into the prayer songs and the singing. It's a big, big thing, and it lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, but it is a lot of energy. So just be prepared for that. A lot of clapping, a lot of singing, a lot of sort of attention to what the guy is doing. But with that is Jaisalmer, the incredible golden city of India. It is a beautiful city. I think the fort is incredible. But to be honest, some things are a little bit disappointing. For example, the city palace, I prefer the private havelis. However, it is a great glimpse into the history of the past, the history of the Thar desert, the history of the Silk Road and the trade that took place, and the different religious sects and groups that coexisted within this one little town. The fort isn't the biggest, but it has its charm, it has its history, and it definitely is a very interesting and unique place to visit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video right here in Jaisalmer. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more food and travel videos. That's going to be it from Jaisalmer, and I'll see you guys again as we continue exploring the great country of India. Bye guys.